Good morning. Joining me today are United States Attorney Pat Fitzgerald from the Northern District of Illinois, United States Attorney Ben Campbell from the Eastern District of New York, the Administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, Michelle Leonhardt, and the Assistant Homeland Security Secretary for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, John Morton. Today we are announcing in a coordinated action major drug trafficking charges against 43 individuals, including cartel leaders, members, and associates in 2 federal districts in 12 indictments. Specifically, we allege that these defendants shipped multi-ton quantities of narcotics into the United States through various established smuggling corridors, and then through a network of affiliated distributors, dispersed these drugs into cities and neighborhoods around the country. The defendants whose indictments we announced today include alleged leaders of the Sinaloa and Beltran-Leyva cartels, such as Joaquin Guzman Loera, also known as Chapo, Ishmael Zambada Garcia, also known as El Mayo, and Arturo Beltran-Leyva. The indictments unsealed today outline nearly 2 decades of criminal activity by these cartels and their leaders here in the United States, as well as Mexico and other countries. These cartels are not abstract organizations operating in far-off places. They are multi-billion-dollar networks funneling drugs onto our streets. What invariably follows these drugs is more crimes and more violence in our communities. The audacity of the cartel's operations is matched only by their sophistication and by their reach. But today, because of the dedicated work of our DEA and ICE agents, the diligence of our prosecutors in Chicago and Brooklyn, and the support of our courageous law enforcement partners in Mexico, we are able to charge leaders and members of these insidious cartels for their heinous crimes here in the United States. Our friends and partners in Mexico are waging an historic and a heroic battle with the cartels as we speak. This is not a fight that we in the United States can afford to watch from the sidelines. The stakes are too high, and the consequences are too real for us. We will continue to investigate, charge, and arrest cartel leaders and their subordinates, and we will continue systematically to dismantle and disrupt their far-reaching and dangerous operations. Now, I will let the 2 U.S. attorneys with us describe the charges in more detail, but suffice it to say that the criminal conduct alleged in these indictments did not take place solely in Mexico. Rather, it played right out here in our own backyards. For example, in Chicago, we have arrested and charged individuals who allegedly worked directly with Mexican cartels to receive 1,000-kilo shipments of drugs and then disperse those drugs into the Chicago community and throughout the country. We have learned from previous successful experiences in fighting organized crime that we must not only go after the leaders of these cartels, but also seize the money that funds their operations. And that is why in these indictments we are seeking forfeiture of more than $5.8 billion in illegal drug proceeds. If we can suffocate their funding sources, we can cripple their operations. Now, breaking up the Mexican drug cartels and stemming the flow of drugs and illegal firearms across the southwest border is a top priority for this administration. And we've made important strides in this fight. Earlier this year, an extensive investigation of the Sinaloa Cartel, known as Project Accelerator, led to the arrest of more than 750 people in the United States and in Mexico, and the seizure of more than $59 million in illegal drug proceeds. We have rolled out the President's National Southwest Border Counter-Narcotic strategy to stem the flow of illegal drugs and their illicit proceeds across the border. We have directed much-needed resources to break up the cartels and to support border-related initiatives. Just last month, for example, I announced $8.7 million in Recovery Act funds for California communities to use in fighting crime and drug trafficking as part of our Southwest border strategy. We have formed an arms trafficking working group to tackle the critically important problem of weapons flowing across the border into Mexico. We have formalized agreements with our partners in the Department of Homeland Security and with the government of Mexico to increase cooperation as we carry out our fight on several fronts. And we have brought charges against high-level Mexican leaders of the Gulf Cartel now known as the Company, and 15 of their top lieutenants for drug trafficking-related crimes. Now, all of these efforts have been in addition to the numerous investigations, prosecutions, arrests, and interdictions that our prosecutors and agents carry out across the country every day. Today's charges demonstrate that we will not stop until these violent criminal enterprises have been eliminated. And we will continue to stand with our partners in Mexico as we carry on this vital fight. Now, on that note, I'd like to acknowledge President Calderon and his administration for all that they continue to do in leading Mexico's fight against violent narco-traffickers. I'd also like to thank the brave professional agents and prosecutors here in the United States who have made the indictments announced today possible. Their hard work, their courage, and their sacrifice make all the difference in our ongoing fight. They have shown in the past that we can defeat international narco-traffickers. I'm confident that with their help, we can do so again. And with that, I will turn it over to Pat Fitzgerald, the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. Pat?
Thank you, Attorney General. 8 indictments unsealed earlier today in Chicago, as well as 7 indictments filed earlier this year, essentially traced tons of cocaine from the streets of Chicago and other cities back to the groups in Mexico who obtained that cocaine by plane, by boat, by submarine, and brought it into Mexico and then shipped it on through a pipeline in Chicago to the United States. It's alleged in the indictments unsealed in Chicago today that approximately 1,500 to 2,000 kilograms of cocaine per month and significant quantities of heroin were going to an organization in Chicago led by the Flores brothers, who were the pipeline. That's about 2 tons per month. That cocaine was being distributed in Chicago and in many other cities in the United States. Going in reverse was a flow of cash, hundreds of millions of dollars going the other direction. What's alleged in the indictments is in essence that this organization in Chicago was receiving the cocaine from 2 separate streams. One was a group charged in one indictment with 11 defendants that involved Chapo Guzman and Mayo Zambada, 2 leaders of different factions of the Sinaloa Cartel who worked together. Their groups put their cocaine together, sent it together to this group that picked it up in LA and Chicago for distribution, and the money was sent back together. On the other side was a different stream of supply, and that was the Arturo Beltran Leyva group. And they also sent substantial cocaine to this group. And in fact, the 2 different sources of supply were at war with each other, where each group was threatening the group in Chicago not to distribute the other's drugs. Now, as of today, both sides of that dispute are indicted, and the Flores Twins organization is out of business. The Flores Twins are in custody, and members of their crew are charged, and a number of them have been arrested. As an example of what has been done by the hard work of DEA agents in Chicago and around the country, during one 2-week period in late November 2008 last year, as a result of 3 seizures in LA, approximately 1 ton of cocaine was seized from the Beltran Leyva group as part of the Chicago investigation. And separately, over a longer period of time, in 13 seizures in California and Illinois, 2 tons of cocaine were seized from the Chapo Guzman and Maya Zambada group. As well as that, $20 million in cash has been seized in the investigation, and we seek to forfeit $1.8 billion. This case doesn't get made without the tremendous work of a number of DEA agents, too numerous to name, in Chicago and elsewhere, working together with a team of prosecutors led by Tom Shakeshaft in Chicago and working with other offices. I take my hat off to the people who did so much hard work, and their work is not yet over. And I'll defer to Ben Campbell, my colleague from Brooklyn.
Thanks, Pat. Good morning, everyone. I'm here today to announce the unsealing of 4 indictments charged in Brooklyn against 10 of the most powerful, violent leaders of Mexican drug cartels. Those indictments are as follows. First, the Federation indictment names 6 defendants for their roles in allegedly importing 127,000 kilograms, that's 127 metric tons, of cocaine into the United States, much of which originated with the Norte Valley Cartel, one of Colombia's most violent and powerful cartels between 1990 and 2005. Approximately 22,500 kilograms of that cocaine was seized in September 1994 in 2 shipments by the United States Coast Guard off the coast of Mexico. The indictment also alleges that the Federation is an organized crime syndicate with representatives from several of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in Mexico. It further charges that the indicted defendants, including CPOT targets Joaquin Guzman Loria, Ismael Zambada Garcia, Ignacio Coronel Villarreal, and Arturo Beltran Leyva, are the chief leaders of the Federation. The second indictment we unsealed today alleges that CPOT target Vicente Carrillo Fuentes is the principal leader of a cartel known as the Juarez Cartel. This indictment charges the Juarez Cartel received multi-ton shipments of cocaine in Mexico from the Norte Valley Cartel and the AUC, Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, a Colombian paramilitary and drug trafficking organization. According to court documents, the Juarez Cartel operates in the Juarez-El Paso corridor, one of the primary drug smuggling routes along the border from the city of Ciudad, Mexico to El Paso, Texas. The DEA estimates that approximately 90% of the cocaine which enters the United States comes from Mexico. According to the indictment, the Juarez Cartel maintained its power through payment of bribes and numerous acts of violence. The third indictment is known as the Los Gueros indictment. This charges Luis Rodriguez Oliveira and his brother Esteban Rodriguez Oliveira with leading Los Gueros, a drug organization that rose to prominence within the Federation. Esteban Rodriguez Oliveira is currently incarcerated in Mexico and is awaiting extradition to the United States. According to court documents, Los Gueros allegedly operated a narcotic supply route that originated in Mexico, stretched into Texas, and branched off to various points within the United States, including the New York City metropolitan area. For the 12-year period charged in the indictment from 1996 to 2008, Los Gueros allegedly imported over 100,000 kilograms of cocaine into the United States. The DEA estimates between 2004 and 2006 that organization was responsible for shipping truckloads containing over 2,000 kilograms of cocaine to New York City alone. And in January 2006, Mexican authorities seized approximately 5,200 kilograms of the organization's cocaine that was destined for the United States. Finally, the Tirso Martinez-Sanchez indictment alleges that Martinez-Sanchez is the leader of an international narcotics trafficking network that imports multiple tons of cocaine into the United States from Mexico through California and Texas, and then transports it across the country to cities such as New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. In addition, Martinez-Sanchez also allegedly acts as an importer, transporter, and distributor of cocaine for members of the Juarez Cartel and the Federation. From September 1999 to January 2003, law enforcement authorities in New York, Chicago, and Texas seized approximately 7,600 kilograms of the organization's cocaine. Now, as you all know, an indictment is simply how a criminal case is begun, and all defendants are charged in an indictment are presumed innocent until proven guilty. But today's indictments that we are announcing are the result of a significant national and international cooperative effort. Quite simply, we could not have brought these charges without the hard work and dedication of numerous law enforcement colleagues in DEA, ICE, the New York City Police Department, the Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs Section of the Department of Justice's Criminal Division, and several U.S. attorneys' offices around the country, including our colleagues in the Northern District of Illinois, Southern District of Texas, and the Southern District of Florida. We thank them all for their efforts. I'm particularly proud of the Assistant United States Attorneys in our office involved in these prosecutions: Andrea Goldbarg, Clara Kadeshian, Bonnie Clapper, Stephen Meyer, Walter Norkin, Patricia Natopoulos, and Carolyn Picorni. They are part of a long line of Eastern District prosecutors who have worked tirelessly in our ongoing effort to serve the citizens of our district and our country by endeavoring to rid our communities of the scourge of drug trafficking. We will not rest until that battle is won. I now introduce Michelle Leonhardt, DEA Administrator.
Good morning. I want to start by thanking Attorney General Holder for recognizing the hard work and dedication of so many DEA agents working in Mexico and around the country. Many of the case agents on these investigations are here today with us this morning. Today's indictments are yet another strike against the leadership of the Mexican drug cartels. Our relentless investigations penetrated deep into these pervasive criminal organizations, connecting street operations in U.S. communities like Chicago and New York to the top drug kingpins calling the shots in Mexico. Make no mistake, along with our courageous partners in Mexico, we will break these cartels and we will pursue these leaders. In these cases, we documented the direct involvement of CPOTs, or kingpins, in the Sinaloa and the Juarez cartels and the Los Gueros drug trafficking organization. They and the organizations they lead are responsible for terrorizing communities in Mexico and for smuggling ton quantities of cocaine, large amounts of heroin, and other dangerous drugs into the United States each year. Specifically, DEA in Chicago and DEA and ICE in New York established direct connections from the streets of Chicago and New York to 10 drug kingpins at the highest command and control levels of their organizations. And this led to the unsealing of indictments in Chicago, including Sinaloa C. Potts, Arturo Beltran Leyva, Ishmael Zambada Garcia, and Joaquin Guzman Loria, also known as Chapo Guzman. We also have new indictments in the Eastern District of New York against Vicente Carrillo Fuentes, a leader of the Juarez Cartel, and Esteban and Luis Rodriguez Olvera of the Los Guerros drug trafficking organization. The Mexico-based Sinaloa Cartel, also known as the Federation, is among the most violent and insidious of these organizations. And working closely with our brave partners in Mexico, we're keeping up unrelenting pressure on the Federation, as well as the Juarez Cartel and the other Mexican drug cartels. And we're determined to dismantle these cartels and their domestic cells. During the course of these investigations, DEA and our partners made noteworthy seizures of drugs and assets, including more than $22.6 million in cash, more than 32,500 kilos of coke, and 64 kilograms of heroin. Many of these notorious criminals appear on the most wanted lists of both countries, Mexico and the United States. And in fact, for many of the cartel leaders, the United States offers rewards up to $5 million each for information that leads to their arrest or capture. And there are fewer and fewer places for these criminals to hide. So looking forward, we are committed to tracking down the leaders of these Mexican drug trafficking cartels and sustaining the pressure on their organizations and operations. And with our Mexican law enforcement partners, we'll find them and we will bring them to justice. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm John Morton, the Assistant Secretary for ICE. As you've heard, these indictments represent years of work by ICE and our partners in the law enforcement community, particularly the Drug Enforcement Administration and the United States Attorney's offices. Just to give you some perspective, ICE agents alone invested over 20,000 hours of work in the United States and Mexico to make these cases. The drug cartels we bring to justice today are not indestructible. Rather, they are made up of men who commit crime. And through these indictments, these men will be left with lives on the run, looking over their shoulders, and they should be looking. Finally, let me note for all of you here the significance not only of the indictment of these individuals, but the reflection that these indictments bring on the growing cooperation between the Departments of Justice and the Departments of Homeland Security. It's with great pleasure that I say I've known most of the people standing here at the podium with me for a long time. I came from the Department of Justice, and I can tell you firsthand after a long career in federal law enforcement that the cooperation between the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Immigration and Customs Enforcement is unparalleled. It is growing stronger by the day, and you are going to continue to see these kinds of cases, these kinds of joint investigations, the kind of concerted effort in Mexico with our partners to hunt these kinds of criminals down, to work with our partners at the U.S. Attorney's Office to charge them and to bring them to justice. Thank you very much.
Any questions you might have?
Yes, Mr. Attorney General, good morning. I'd like to ask your personal perspective on this. In light of the fact that you were Deputy Attorney General 10 years ago, how does the war on drugs appear to you today compared to a decade ago? It sounds like just about everything you said today you could have said in a press conference a decade ago, and in fact, if anything's changed, perhaps it's less cooperation from cocaine-producing countries in South America. That's one. And secondly, if I might, since we have you and we're talking about perspective, it was more than a decade ago that you helped prosecute the Lockerbie case, and just recently you begged the Scottish minister not to release the man who was found guilty, and yet today they did so. I'd like your personal opinion about that as well. Thank you.
Well, we're very disappointed with the Scottish executive's decision to release Mr. McGrahy. I do not believe that the interests of justice were served by that release. 270 individuals, 189 Americans died as a result of his actions. He did not show compassion when he planned and executed that heinous act, has not shown any remorse for what he did, and in my view, the release was entirely inappropriate. We have communicated this to Scottish authorities previously. It is my belief that he should have been required to serve his entire sentence. Our deepest sympathies go out to the families and to the survivors of the survivor families who continue to suffer as a result of Mr. McGrahy's actions back in 1988. With regard to the first question, I think that actually things are different. We have a Mexican administration that is committed to fighting the drug cartels in a way that is unprecedented. People in Mexico, law enforcement officials in Mexico are literally putting their lives on the line. We see, I think, unprecedented amounts of cooperation at the federal level in our government, as John Morton was indicating, that I think has made us more successful in this fight. This is an ongoing struggle, but I don't think that the fact that it is an ongoing struggle necessarily means it is one that we cannot win. I think we are in a substantially different place than we were 10 years ago, and I expect that we will be in a substantially different place in the future. So I'm very hopeful that as time passes, we will ultimately eradicate these cartels.
You've indicted all these top leaders of the cartels. Is it your understanding that the Mexicans will agree to the extradition of whatever top cartel leader is caught?
Well, we certainly are working with our partners in that regard to try to bring that about. As Michelle indicated, there are substantial rewards that are out there for the capture of these people. There have been unprecedented numbers of extraditions to the United States over the past 2-3 years as the Calderon administration has captured these people and made them available to us here in the United States for charges that they are facing, and that is why these indictments, I believe, are so important. Ultimately, I expect that they will be here in the United States and they will face justice.
General Holder, the fact that you were more focused in these cartels, in the Sinaloa Cartel, the Federation, or the Juarez Cartel, means that they were the more predominant in the U.S. And in this case, what happened to the Afro Cartel, the Golfo Cartel, the Zetas, or La Familia in Michoacan?
We are obviously going after those cartels where we have jurisdiction, where our laws will allow us to reach them. We are cognizant of the fact that there are other organizations that have had a devastating impact in Mexico, and we continue to work with our Mexican partners in Mexico to try to fight them as well. And to the extent that we develop information, evidence that will allow us to bring further charges against those other people, those other organizations, we'll obviously do so.
But if you allow me, they are also cartels that have been getting a lot of profits in the U.S. Maybe Mr. Leonhardt can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Rest assured, there are major operations ongoing right now against all of the Mexican cartels, and each one of those Mexican cartels significantly impacts the United States because they're all sending cocaine loads to the United States. Proceeds from the sales on the streets of America are headed back to Mexico along with the weapons. So this is the announcement of the top 10 of a couple of the cartels, but we had Project Reckoning almost a year ago, and we announced indictments against the leadership of the Gulf Cartel, and the Attorney General and I, just in February, announced other actions against Sinaloa. So we're after all of the cartels.
Can you explain to us, for example, Chapo Guzman was indicted, probably about 10 years ago in San Diego, and a couple of other guys have been indicted before. What's different about today's announcement? I mean, what does it signify?
Yeah, we're often asked, you can indict over and over again, and why do you do that? It's simple. These indictments now are more recent, and every time we we target and go after these cartel leaders, we find out more and more ways to attack them, and that's why we continue to do it. What's different now, the big difference, which the Attorney General already covered, is the big difference is Mexico. We have a true partner and have had a true partner through the Calderon administration, and we believe we can go after these cartel leaders such as Chapo, who's on the run, and bring them to justice, to include eventual extradition to the United States.
Let me make something very, very clear here. These are not symbolic acts that we are taking today. Our intention is to indict these people, to get these people to the United States, and to put them in jail for extended periods of time. This is not simply an expression of displeasure by the United States government. This is the result of a lot of really intense work by a great number of people in our government in cooperation with people in Mexico. And our intention is to indict these people and, as I said, to bring them to justice here in the United States. This is not symbolism.
On the way over, I heard one of the family members connected with the Lockerbie tragedy talking about the lack of compassion that their families were shown. What can be said to those families? And then secondly, is there anything the United States government can do to deal with the situation?
I'm not sure there's much that the United States government can do at this point, but I want those families to know, and I want the American people to know, that the United States government did all that we could prior to this decision being made to make sure that this decision would not, in fact, be made. I had contact with Scottish authorities. Secretary of State Clinton did as well. We argued as best we could to try to point out the injustice of such an act. The decision was ultimately made by Scottish authorities to release Mr. McGrahy. Well, there was a press conference, I understand, that they held earlier in the day, and I'll let them speak for themselves.
Mr. Attorney General, there's a deadline looming for the release of the CIA IG's report related to interrogations. This morning, former CIA Director Michael Hayden, in his words, said that it would be destructive for that release to happen to CIA operations. Wondering what your response is to that, and also, where are you in determining whether to appoint a prosecutor to investigate those interrogations?
We do have a deadline on the 24th, which I guess is on Monday, and we're working with our colleagues in the CIA to release only those things that we think will be consistent with our national security interests and yet responsive to what our responsibilities are as a result of that lawsuit. So we will not be doing anything that would endanger the American people or in some ways lessen our national security. With regard to any ongoing decisions, we will speak to that when a decision is made.
Mr. Attorney General, just a quick question about Lockerbie. What are your concerns that this decision by the Scottish executive, what's your concern of the message that it sends to people who might consider doing something like this? This man only served 8 or 9 years behind bars and is now being sent to Libya.
Well, there are, I suppose our counterparts in Scotland would say that there are extenuating circumstances, and perhaps a message should not be drawn from that. We expressed the concerns that we had, that given the nature of the acts, given the number of lives that were lost, that Mr. McGrahy should serve the entirety of his sentence and should have died in jail.
Mr. Attorney General, when did you first learn that this was possible? Did this come up in your trip to England earlier this year? When did you first become aware that this was possible?
We've had conversations, I think, over the past few months. I'm not sure exactly when it first came up, but we've made our feelings known about this in a variety of ways over the past few months.
If I may ask about the decision of President Calderon, the administration, to remove all custom officers in the border. What could be the impact for the joint operations? Were you aware, I suppose, of this decision, but you are even putting together a joint task forces, as far as I understand. What could be the impact?
Let me answer that one. It's important to note that this is part of a professionalization of the Customs Service by Mexican authorities. We have been working very closely with our counterparts, particularly at SOT, on this issue, both at ICE and at CBP. And we've been talking about ways that we can assist them with the training of the new officers. And I don't think that this is going to harm our existing relationships. On the contrary, I think it's going to strengthen them considerably. The customs authorities in Mexico have slightly different powers than we do here in the United States, and in particular, they don't have as strong criminal investigative powers, and we tend to work with other parts of the Mexican government. But the long and short of it is that this is a welcome step. We've been working with them to help them as they go through with it, and I don't think it's going to hurt our relationships at all.
One more question.
Isn't it worrying, the fact that they are moving all these officers all of a sudden when they, it doesn't worry you, the fact that they are moving all of them or replacing them all of a sudden?
It doesn't. I think this is the right move, and we are trying to support them with all the training and assistance we can.
Some trepidation, Mr.
Question. You mentioned that Almagri has not expressed any remorse. Another person who hasn't expressed any remorse is Colonel Gaddafi. The reports out of Britain today is that Gaddafi's son is flying Almagri back to Libya. Gaddafi is coming to the United States next month to address the United Nations. U.S. officials in this administration, as well as the last one, have been embracing Gaddafi, trying to improve relations with Libya. From your perspective, from the perspective of justice, should the United States be stay on the course of improving relations with Colonel Gaddafi's Libya?
Well, I think that given some of the actions that the Libyan government has taken in the recent past, there is a basis for, I think, there's a legitimate basis for us to try to improve our relationship with Libya. Obviously, what happened today with regard to Mr. Megrahi is something that I think is very regrettable. Whether that'll have an impact on our relationship with our ongoing relationship with Libya, I'm not sure. The concern that I have is with the decision made by Scottish authorities to release him.
Thank you all.